getting up and getting food and coffee, but I do ask that we start to lower the volume of the talk in the room so that the speakers can be heard. So welcome, Happy New Year. Glad everybody is here. Hey, classroom management comes back. A little bit, it takes a while, there we go. Glad to be together in person. I was remembering, I think last night it occurred to me that it was raining the first time I opened our spring semester 4 years ago, and you all blamed me. I don't know if you remember that, but you all said I brought it from Seattle. So I guess the last couple weeks have actually been my fault, and I apologize to all the people who have flooded homes and who are feeling a little bit of seasonal affective disorder. Welcome to Seattle. This is kind of crazy. And I heard more for the weekend. But the good news is, while it is raining today, it is going to be sunny tomorrow, and that is the story of Saddleback. It will be a sunny day tomorrow, and we know that good things are ahead, and we'll talk more about that today. So I want to share a little bit of something as I kick this off. So I love cafeterias, and I was really excited. I don't know, was it like a year and a half ago when we decided to remodel this cafeteria and put in some new furniture and gussy it up. I love cafeterias, and I've never quite made the connection to childhood from that. And I finally did it a couple of years ago. When I was a child, as a treat, my mother would take my brother and I to the Sears cafeteria for dinner out. So back when there was Sears, for those of you who remember Sears stores, the big ones actually had cafeterias. And that was like the place you went. If you were working class, that was like a good night out, a restaurant out. And that was great fun. And it was only as an adult that I learned the reason we went there was not a treat. It was because the Sears credit card was the only credit card my mother had. And when she was between commissions and trying to stretch food at home, she would put a couple dinners on the Sears credit card to last a couple more days. I feel no negativity about that. I feel like that was a great thing that she did and a great experience that I had, and I still love cafeterias today. And the reason I share that story is because we are largely influenced by where we are from and the experiences that we bring to work, to our relationships, from childhood, from young adulthood, and from all the experiences and all the way that we've been treated well or poorly by people in our lives. And that's important for us to keep in mind as instructors and employees who support instructors and students directly, but it's also important to keep in mind as we interact with each other, that we all bring things to the table from our own experiences. So the theme of today's presentations is where I'm from. So here's how this is going to work today. So Heidi and I were talking about how to make this presentation a little bit different today. We all want to do updates. Heidi's got some updates. Michelle's got some updates for you. I have some updates for you, and we'll still get our updates in. But we wanted to make it more thematic, and we wanted to do something a little different. So Heidi, through her connections to Lucas, obviously, has great familiarity with our speech and debate forensic students. And I have seen these folks perform before, and they're completely amazing. And I've seen them perform in different categories. So Heidi brought a couple students to my office, and we got to see them perform from the prose category, where they read a selection of prose with drama. And they kind of blew us away. So we started thinking, because the prose they selected was very much connected to upbringing and family and home, that this would be a nice way of incorporating a where I'm from theme, not only for them, and we'll introduce them when we get there in the roster today, but also from all of our speakers. So each speaker today has been asked to share with you their where I'm from story. And I hope that will not just endear you and get you to connect to these speakers, but also that it may start a trend that you may want to do this at the start of meetings in your own units. You may want to do it in your classrooms with your students. Where I'm from actually was a national project about 6 or 8 years ago, especially in K-12. And it was very popular, and it did a lot of good in a lot of ways in terms of understanding otherness and diversity and experiences that we bring into our classrooms. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first speaker, knowing that each of them is going to share a little where I'm from category. So get up, walk around, whatever you need to do this morning as we go through our cavalcade of speakers. You're going to hear where I'm from and some great updates as we go along. There's coffee, lots of food as people come in, no problem. Want to thank you all for being here. Want to acknowledge our trustees for being here. Trustee Milchiker, Trustee Rydell, Trustee Inman, thank you all for being here. Vice Chancellor McDonald's in the house. I know my team's in the house. We probably have another couple Vice Chancellors in the house. I see Anne Marie at the back. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Gable. So welcome, everybody. We are very happy you're here. Without further ado, I want to present our first and most important speaker, and that is Chancellor Barnes.
Hey. Good morning and welcome to the spring 2023. Are you used to writing 2023 yet? Remember back in the day when we used to use checks? You brought me back in time because you were talking about Sears, and you brought me to Kmart and the 3 sub sandwiches in the plastic baggie for lunch. That was my favorite. I wish they still had that. So welcome. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be able to, and honored to be able to share some snippets about myself. And I'm actually feeling intimidated. I'm like, wow, we have the forensics team here. Oh my goodness. But so I wrote a little bit about myself, and you kind of have to read into it. So it's little snippets about my life. But before I do, I also just want to thank President Stern and our trustees and the entire Saddleback College community for your continued work, transformational work that you're doing. I know it's not easy to transform and innovate and, shed from that butterfly shell, right, into this new butterfly. I don't know why I thought about that. But, again, not easy. But I think what I see here at the college is you all keep your eye on the prize and the beacon, and that is student access. That is student success. That is student equity. And I think everyone has their eye on that prize, and the path to get there is not always smooth. But I know you will get there, and you'll continue to see good success. So I'm super excited to be here. So where I'm from. Grandparents, beautiful, humble, hardworking, love of family is second to none. Didn't even know about the pennies in your pocket as we were rich in love, support. Smell of adobo and lumpia, smell of tamales, rice, and beans fill the air. Sitting on the floral plastic covered couch in your small but warm living room. Yeah. Laughing, eating, away from Mexico, away from the Philippines. But this feels like home. We are here together. Oh, I didn't know I was going to get teary-eyed. We are here together. This is home. Thank you for making the sacrifices to pave the way. I miss you. So my mom, the eldest of 5, inspirational, beautiful, funny, spiritual, multi-ethnic, 20 years old, 3 kids, single, strong, self-sacrificing, funny, loving, 1970s, disco, groovy, drugs all around, dark times, happy times, dancing in the living room doing chores, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Jackson 5, empty pockets, full hearts, hard times and good times, always there, always our rock. Thank you. I love you, Mom. Me, a kid, 1 of 3, a brother, a sister, fun-loving, laughter, support. I'm quiet, observant, studious, finding my way. Mexican-American border nearby. Why don't you speak Spanish or Tagalog? I feel different. Who am I? Friends in the neighborhood, cartwheels in the yard. Nadia Comenici. I know you all are part of my era. You're like, oh, I know how old she is now. Barbie, Shrinky Dinks, Easy Bake. First one to college. Go Julie from the block. Broke, determined, finding my way, accepted by others, including myself, graduating, building on grandparents' dreams, dream job, paving the way. You made it. Still just Julie from the block. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barnes. Next up, Michelle McDougall-Jackson.
Thank you, President Stern. Good morning, esteemed colleagues, Chancellor Barnes, trustees. So I'm going to be totally honest. When I received the email from Dr. Stern asking me to speak today, I was shocked. He wanted me to speak with leaders in our district who are brilliant and interesting people, and I've never thought of myself as a great public speaker. I can get a point across, sure, but my story, where I'm from, it's remarkably and hopelessly average. So I grew up in a traditional middle-class American family. To look at me and to know me is to know that I'm part of many majority groups, and because of that, I've been afforded many privileges in my life. Many of my achievements today, I attribute to four things: my faith and faithfulness, privilege, hard work, and kindness. And don't worry, because I have it hammered in my head from AP 11th grade composition class that I'm going to support statements that I make in this speech today. So, neither of my parents were very much into family history or the rich cultures that they came from. Their focus growing up was assimilation and fitting in. My dad likes to joke of his family history that his dad was Scottish and his mom was waitress. So, what I knew of my grandparents on my father's side was that my grandfather started his first semester at UC Berkeley when his high school girlfriend's father showed up in a pickup truck with an actual shotgun in the back and told Grandpa Jack that if he knew what was good for him, he'd come back down to Fontana, California, where my grandmother was pregnant. So he could marry her and support her and raise their baby. The rest is history, I suppose. On the other side, my mom, Valerie, was the granddaughter of two sets of Italian immigrants who, true story, was named Valeria, but her entire life didn't know that she was just being called Valerie to sound more American, and she didn't realize that she was using the wrong legal name in many documentations until she tried to draw Social Security when she retired a few years ago. She met my dad at 24 years old, and after a 2-week romance, they were married. She became a cashier at the local drugstore, and my dad started loading boxes from a box-making factory on and off of trucks. Neither one of them ever thought about attending college, except for the handful of community colleges classes that my mom took straight out of high school. She dropped out when she got her first job, and then she worked for 4 years until she had her first baby. So, enter me. In elementary school, I was the only second grader who couldn't read. It turns out I was dyslexic. So my second grade teacher, ill-equipped to handle a learning disability like the one I had, decided it would be a great idea to tell the rest of the eight-year-olds in my class that I was struggling learning to read. What could go wrong, right? Before she started excluding me from our out-loud reading activities that we participated in daily, and eventually asked for a typewriter to be placed in the back of the classroom where my desk was moved adjacent to, so I could type away at the back of the classroom loudly from copying sentences from a book I couldn't read while the rest of my classmates looked on. It seemed pretty hopeless for little me, but I was blessed to have a pretty mild form of dyslexia that affected my visual processing, and it could be treated with prescription eyeglasses and occupational therapy. I was privileged to have a mom who felt like she could intervene in my teacher's process and seek the medical treatment that I needed. Throw in a bunch of hard work because I took initiative to get myself up to reading level that I needed to be at, and the kindness of my occupational therapist who frequently told me that I was smart, that it was cool that my brain was different, and that she really enjoyed teaching me. All of those ingredients made the perfect pie to get me out of a situation where I was labeled as slow and not applying myself to one where I became an advanced placement student and on the track for college. So, on to high school. My parents convinced me I'd attend college by simply speaking it into being. Truly. They'd say, I don't know, figure it out when you get to college. Or, when you get to college, you'll know that. They'll teach you that there. So I didn't know what that meant or how to get to college, but I had the privilege of living in a pretty decent suburban neighborhood, which happened to have a lot of AP high school class offerings and plenty of extracurricular activities, and I kept working hard. I took the PSAT, and I did so poorly, but I realized that I needed to work even harder, so I started meeting with teachers on my lunch breaks and stayed after school for SAT preparatory courses. Algebra was the hardest subject for me, and when my midterm came in at 49%, right before I needed to submit grades and GPAs to college applications, I went into my teacher's classroom and asked if he would tutor and help me. I started spending all my lunches with him and staying in his classroom trying to figure out variables. So I admitted I wasn't getting it. He took pity on me and allowed me some extra credit work that brought me up to a B in his class. But if it weren't for his kindness, I'm convinced I never would have received that offer letter from UC Riverside that fall. College, a whirlwind. I learned right away I needed to spend lots of time ingratiating myself with professors and staff members in A&R and the student payment office. I had no idea what I was doing, but with a lot of persistence, faith that I would make it through, and kindness from a few patient staff and faculty on campus, I graduated. And the remarkably average little girl with dyslexia went on to get a Master of Fine Arts degree in stage management from UC Irvine. I wrote my thesis on, get this, intergenerational and gender-based communication gaps within the performing arts field. While planning a wedding and working as a stage manager at Disneyland Resort, I didn't sleep once in 2008. So when I take a big step back and I look at my remarkably average life, I can't help but think of our own Saddleback students. I imagine my life then looked a lot like the one many of our current students are leading now. I see so many similarities between myself and our own first-generation students. And as much as we all pride ourselves on breaking down barriers, the world of academia is still completely overwhelming to a student who doesn't have a built-in support system to help navigate things like process and paperwork. Or maybe for a non-traditional student who might feel too embarrassed to ask the questions that I personally pestered faculty and staff with when I was a student. And we serve students today who are coming up against barriers that I simply could not have imagined while I was in school. So, as I think of who I am and where I come from, I feel compelled to ask you all, will we be like the strangers who intervened in my life so frequently to orient me on my journey? Will we offer kindness so struggling students on our campus will leave the first week of school feeling faithful that they're in the right place? Will we remind them that they're unique and interesting and that it's cool that their brain works differently? I feel so proud to be a part of the Saddleback community. I think we do amazing, inspiring work for our students, and we have a beautiful opportunity to impact lives every day. As a first-generation student, I had nowhere to look but straight ahead, and anyone who took the time to explain process and procedure to me did so out of the kindness of their hearts because I didn't know the questions to ask. And that feels like an excellent segue to tell you about Classified Senate and some of our initiatives. The first thing I want to acknowledge is that we had an incredibly successful first generation celebration this fall, our first ever, yay! And thank you. And I wanted to acknowledge every single administrator, faculty member, and classified professional. You all know who you are. There's too many to name, but you all made our event so successful. Thank you all for your support. It was incredible. And we will do it again next fall. The other update is that we're bringing Caring Campus back to Saddleback College. Yay! So the management team is at a point now where they're going to be tapping classified professionals who they believe are influential leaders in their area to join training sessions throughout this semester. And you know, as you all have heard from my story, this is such a personal thing for me. This is going to systematize and solidify the things that we're already doing to care for student needs. And it reminds me of all of those little acts of kindness that I relied on so heavily to get myself through my own college experience. And Caring Campus is going to help us focus on celebrating those acts within our own campus community. Very quickly, I also want to say that IVC and Saddleback College are partnering together to bring back Classified Professional Development Day to all classified professionals in the district. Save the date, March 22nd, 2023. Crown Valley Community Center in Laguna Niguel is the location. The theme will be caring for our campuses and ourselves. And then finally, I wanted everybody on campus to be aware that Classified Senate is going to be hosting presentations from student service areas throughout this semester. So if you have a department or program who's doing something that you feel like classified professionals would benefit from knowing, please reach out to me so that we can schedule and host this topic, because we want to help educate and cross-train classified professionals on campus. We'll be meeting starting January 30th every other Monday throughout the semester from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up, there's a Where I'm From story that I know, but I don't think many people know it, because I don't think she tells it very often. So we're going to interrupt our updates with one more speaker for a Where I'm From story. I want to ask up to the front, Vice President Tram-Vo Kumamoto.
So I really appreciate this opportunity to get to know you all a little bit better by sharing my story. So you'll look at this picture and you go, why did Tram put on a PowerPoint a picture of a bus? So I don't know if you all realize this, but when you use PowerPoint and you do like this little design thing on the right, it actually will look at the words that you have and come up with pictures. So this morning, I'm doing this, and I'm like, why do I keep getting buses and transportation things showing up? It says Tram-Vo Kumamoto. What is happening? Ta-da, this is Tram. As you know, when you go to Disneyland, you see Tram as well. And so I thought, oh, heck, I'm going to start with this. This is the story of my life. You know, your name gets put into something and people will look, and how does it connect to the American version of it? PowerPoint, Tram. All right, next slide, please. So as some of you might know, my family came to the United States in 1978. We escaped from Vietnam. So I purposely use the word escaped because that's how my parents interpreted it to me. And, you know, we were your boat people. So we took off a little fishing boat, very similar to that, probably looked just like that. I have absolutely no memories of it. I will not go back to my repressed memories to find out. But these are stories I've heard, and this is what visuals I have of the experience. And my parents sacrificed everything. They left everything behind. They took a risk, and they gave us opportunity. And so those are my beginnings. And I would say my memories start from that point forward. So unfortunately, this picture, darn it, cut off. It says friends meeting there. So when we escaped from Vietnam, we actually ended up in a refugee camp in Thailand. We lived there for 8 months before we were sponsored to the United States. We were lucky. We actually found a sponsor. My parents, my mom had a good network. She was from upper middle class. She had family already in the United States, and they were able to find a church to then sponsor us. It was a Quaker church in Palo Alto. And so the church is here, and it's, you know, they have friends meetings. It's very appropriate that we were coming into that kind of a community. When we came to the United States, we lived at the church with the caretakers for the church, for the Quaker meeting place. And so that started the beginnings of our community building. And my parents focused on 3 main things: community, collaboration, and then connecting with people. So I don't know if you recognize it, but I think it happens quite a bit in different immigrant families, is that when you first come over, the resources are so limited. Everybody pools their money together and pools all their resources to actually be able to afford any kind of mobility. And so my parents quickly identified others that were in their situation. We moved to San Jose, the Mecca of Vietnamese people, and outside of Santa Ana and South Orange County here. So, and they created this network that they all every month would put in X amount of dollars. And at the end of the month, there would be a pool of money. And as different families needed to rent a house, buy a car, get groceries if they lost a job, they would actually go to that pool of money and then use that and then pay it back as part of that circle. And so as you can see, I started off with that kind of a sense of community and collaboration and connection and network. As I grew up, we always had people living with us in our house. We never were in a family house of just us. It was always cousins, uncles, and people I don't know but still called aunts. And so that was kind of the surroundings in which we had. It ended up creating a way for me to live that was very creative and different, and definitely puts me where I am today. That thinking that it's not just our sole, nuclear family. It's like this bigger sense of family. Every weekend, my mom would cook a big pot of pho, and everybody would come over and eat, and it would be just nonstop. And that's how we lived for many years, until my dad got a job in San Francisco and we moved to the city. So next slide. So as my parents navigated coming to the United States, the place that they went to first was City College. So first San Jose City and then San Francisco City. And as you can tell, the community colleges mean a lot to me because it gave my parents an opportunity. So my parents, so education and workforce development is very critical. As we see immigrant families coming now, what are they needing? You're grown adults with kids. You're needing jobs. So it's not about just the transfer path. It is about getting our students who are older into spaces where they can provide for their families. And so my parents drafting, my dad was in the Navy and did probably some level of engineering, but then ended up into drafting when he came here. My mom, strangely enough, as a woman in Vietnam, was educated and was a newspaper editor and ended up working assembly line and early childhood development because that's what was translatable. And so I think that we oftentimes think that these programs are not opportunities and that they're dead end. But as long as we're providing that entrance for people to elevate, it's okay, right? And it took me a long time to think about that in that way. And because we often talk about, early child development, how does that work? You're getting someone into a position that they're not going to necessarily be living wage. Well, for many women who are immigrants, that's the only place of work that their husbands will allow them. So the fact that they can enter into that place of work in that venue starts the beginning of that opportunity for them and their family. And so that's really core to who I am, their experience. Next slide. So my role in my family from a very, very early age, literally probably younger than this, is I was a translator, I was an advocate, and I was my parents' personal assistant. Every single form, every single meeting, every single parent conference, I translated myself, right? And all the way through. And even to the point where my mom just passed away 2 years ago, and we had to take care of her estate. She had one asset, which life changer for all of us, the one asset, which was a house. And Elliot said, "You're so busy, Tram. Like, how could you be managing all of this and your parents' stuff?" But that's my role in my family. So you can see that from these roles, I learned a lot. And because I had to do these things for my parents, I had to translate, I had to fill out the forms. I navigated so many social services systems you would not believe, right? When I had to do financial aid, simple. Why? Because I knew what documents I needed to have. I knew, because I'd already gone through how many other social services agencies to do this work. So I think part of the challenge is that I had the practice. Some of our students might be living in the same circumstances but don't have that practice. I just happened to be the person my parents deemed to do this work, right? And so I learned. And as a kid, you have no fear. You ask questions, people tell you answers, no big deal. Like they don't think that you need to know, right? So I asked all the questions I could ask. So I learned a whole lot about systems and processes and how to navigate them. So again, another reason of where I am today and why I do the things I do. Next slide. So what are overcoming some of my own challenges? And these are just more specific to me and my scenario. So I'm first in my family to go to college. I can't even remember how awful it was to write the personal essay on a freaking typewriter. And I didn't have the fancy ones, just so you know. Like there were the other kids who had the fancy IBM ones that you can go back and like delete, and it had a line of like electronic, like it had some computing, and so you can go back at least one line. No, it was take it back out, start all over again, kind of thing. And so I actually ended up finishing high school in 3 years because I hated school. So you would think I'm Asian and I have great grades and I did really well and I love school. I did not like school. And so I went to a very academic school. It was super competitive. I am not a competitive person. It was awful for me. When I got a chance to graduate early, and the only reason I graduated early because my mom made me go to summer school every year because she didn't want me out on the streets. And so I had enough credits at the end of my junior year to graduate, and all I was missing was English, 4th year of English to finish. So that summer, my high school allowed me to take my 2 senior English classes, and I was able to finish. And I think that is actually why I got into Cal, is because I was different in that way. And I didn't get into Cal your traditional way. I got into Cal through a program called CAP. I don't remember what it stands for, but it was a guaranteed transfer program. As long as you went to the local community college, you were guaranteed transfer as a junior. My dream is that program will come back for us as a system. And so that's how I ended up going to Cal, but my journey, again, went to a community college, and so, like my parents, had that touch there and definitely made an impact for me and my family. Other things that I've had to navigate is the general gender role expectations. Well, I actually had to do all the paperwork and navigate all that stuff for my parents. There was still an expectation. I was a girl. I needed to be in a house. I needed to be home. I needed to cook. I needed to clean. All of those expectations were there. So when I went off to college, because it was nearby, every weekend I had to go home and I had to do family stuff. There was no study time whatsoever. So there was the gender expectations, and then there were familial expectations. And I think the biggest thing for me, and Chancellor Barnes, you mentioned it, is this space of being in the middle. Like, you're navigating, not Vietnamese enough, I'm not white enough, because heck, I don't look white, and then too educated when I'm hanging out with my family, who, half of them don't go to college, and then not educated enough when I'm hanging out with all my friends who are growing up in these different environments that are traditional academic backgrounds. So it's navigating all of that has been very challenging, and when I think about our students and I think about how do we create an environment that works well for them and supports them, my job always is to try and see what can I do to lessen another step, lessen another form, lessen another application process, and to try and make the system be much more ready for that student so that they're not having to navigate, because not everybody got that lucky and was deemed the one to fill out paperwork for their parents. And so that's my background, and that's what I bring to work every day.
Thank you, Tram. I know that many of you have great where I'm from stories, and maybe you have been reluctant to share them. Sometimes they can be painful, and I hope you will be inspired by some of the stories that you hear today to share those with your colleagues and maybe with your students as well. Particularly, I think one thing you heard, as Tram said, both she and Dr. Barnes have in common this notion of intersectionality in their own upbringing, and how many of our students are also from dual race, dual multi-ethnic backgrounds and share those same issues. So thank you very much. Without further ado, we're going to move on to our Academic Senate President. Welcome, Heidi Ochoa.
Hi, everybody. So good to see you. Happy spring. As Elliot said, my name is Heidi Ochoa. Today, I am Saddleback College's Academic Senate President. I am also a communication studies professor. I'm a theater director. I am a blogger. I am a wife. I am a mama of 2 children. I own a home. Oh, my emotions are coming. Brace it, or I should embrace it. I own a home. Last semester, I purchased a brand new car. Yeah, that's pretty big, right? I am currently wearing boots, cowboy boots, that cost me $100. And I love them. And I should be ashamed of them. My high school self would not recognize the woman I have become. 23 years ago, when I was 17, I found myself in a continuation high school in Tustin, Santa Ana. My brain and body couldn't keep up with traditional high school. Growing up, I learned a lot, or I moved a lot. I went to 4 different high schools: Mater Dei, Costa Mesa High, Foothill High, and eventually Hillview Continuation High. I'm gonna put this down. My ceramics high school final project was an ashtray with a dolphin imprinted on it. I wish I still had it. Not because I smoke, but as a symbol of my own education, my evolution into this education. My parents are beautiful parents. The circumstances of their lives were rough. They split when I was 2. My father was gay and Mormon. He struggled with a sense of belonging to both his family and his church. My mother, a devout Catholic who found herself single with 2 children at the age of 21. They both did the very best they could to support my brother and I, but the possibilities that defined what they could make with their lives were limited. They both were on new career tracks frequently. They both struggled financially. They both struggled with mental health. Growing up with my parents, my brother and I learned what it means to cover for your family. If you were to ask me what I learned at college during those years, I would say that $2 can buy a burrito and a soda at a cafeteria. That high school friends aren't always the nicest people, and that even the kindest teachers aren't equipped to notice these things. I was disengaged. I was worried constantly. I spent several hours in school a day, and I just wasn't processing any of it. From 8:15 a.m. to 2:15 p.m., I watched the minute hand on the clock move slowly. I never wanted to be called on. I cried easily, as you can probably tell. Perhaps because my less than nutrient-rich diet. Perhaps because my parents were drowning in their own financial and psychological juggle. Perhaps because I couldn't sleep. I moved out the day before I turned 18 with my best friend who liked partying more than she liked herself. I covered for her and her bills a lot too. Somehow, some way, I ended up at Orange Coast College. Some friend said something. For 2 years, I flopped around, returned books to pay for rent and food, dropped classes to pick up extra income opportunities. Somehow, some way, I ended up on the speech and debate team. Within days, I remember feeling like I belonged to my people and my purpose, right? Within days, I remember feeling like I belonged to my people and purpose. I had absolutely no performance background. I was part of a cohort who looked after me. I was part of a cohort who shared their books, notes, and meals with me, and who encouraged me to go to class, to transfer, to shoot for my own big dream. I got a job at a seafood restaurant. I could buy seafood meals from a select menu for $5. I started eating protein and vegetables regularly. My brain was more satiated. I started processing more. My world started to make sense and my GPA started to show it. The possibilities of what I could make of my life started to expand. Somehow, some way, I scrapped my way through college. It took me 6 years to earn my undergraduate degree. I would argue, had I discovered the speech and debate team, it would have only taken me 4. Imagine if education was designed in such a way that teachers, staff, and administration could catch those of us with housing and food insecurities at an earlier stage in their academic careers. If it didn't rely solely on cohorts to do this work. As an educator, it is my dream. I believe it is all of our dream that we know who our students are as we are welcoming them to the college, that we learn their name and living condition in the same conversation, that we don't learn about their living condition after they fail an exam or drop a course. It is my dream. I believe it is all of our dream that we work in a culture where eating nutrient-rich diets on campus are the norm and supported. That the culture of organizing our budgets around top ramen and Red Bull is countered with available green beans and water. Not broccoli, though. Broccoli causes heartburn. I don't want Corey to have to prioritize Prilosec as a college budget line item. The reality is that you can't feed a student's mind with an education if he is not sure where to go to study, to sleep, to be after class. The reality is that you can't feed a student's mind with an education if her body isn't fed. The reality is that the state can't support all of these realities. It is all of our dreams to build a future for tomorrow. Tomorrow is built on who our students are today, which is why we need to do more than just imagine them as people living for today. We need to support their physical, psychological, and financial well-being today. If we find that somehow, some way, someday, our students will be better prepared to serve their friends, their families, and themselves. They will be better prepared to serve their neighbors and their communities. I believe in this room we can imagine the somehow, some way. We already have in a lot of ways, to help teachers, staff, and administration get their students to self-actualize their own big dreams. Thank you for listening to Heidi Ochoa, forever a community college student.
Thank you, Heidi. Well, we are all the warm-up acts for the following 2 student performances, and I hope if you like hearing from students today, we make this a regular part of our college events. Hearing from students is something that's always really valuable for us, and we welcome it. So the performances today are from speech and debate. There is a category for prose reading with dramatic inflection to give more meaning to that prose. And some of you may not know that's a category. I just learned about it. I always think of speech and debate as being debate and persuasion and advocacy, but there is more to it than that. And as I said to you at the start of our event this morning, when I first heard these performances, I was kind of blown away because they're pretty amazing, and I think they fit very well with our theme here today. So I would like to introduce you to our students. I'll introduce them both, and then I'm going to ask Ellen to perform first, and then Jack. So Ellen Nguyen, raise your hand. And Jack Brubaker. So our students are going to be doing prose readings today, and we'd like to acknowledge not just them, but all the students who participate in speech, debate, and forensics as being a very prominent team among our all-star students that go out and represent us in so many ways. We had the pleasure of celebrating our fierce women athletes of the soccer team and their national championship just a couple months ago. And we want to celebrate students who represent us in multiple capacities, so thank you both for being here today. Ellen, please, come on up. Ellen Nguyen. You want to stand? We can do that. I'll bring it over to you.
My mother told me you could be anything you wanted to be in America. You could open up a restaurant, you could work for the government and get good retirement, you could buy a house with almost no money down, you could become rich, you could become instantly famous. And of course, you could be prodigy too, my mother told me when I was 9. You could be best anything. What does Auntie Lido know? Her daughter is only best trick. In their 2022 article, Hopworth and Moon describes a phenomenon known as the immigrant paradox. Essentially, children of immigrant parents have shown to have higher levels of academic and vocational success compared to their parents, but also compared to natural-born U.S. citizens as well. This remains true even considering for other factors, such as socioeconomic levels, family size, and structure. However, this does come at a cost. Children of immigrant parents have shown to have higher levels of stress, stricter family obligations, as well as fewer mental health resources. This following prose describes the dynamic of a first-generation Chinese American who fails to live up to her mother's expectations. Two Kinds by Amy Tan. America was where all my mother's hopes had lay. She had come to San Francisco in 1949 after losing everything in China. Her mother and father, her home, her first husband, and her 2 daughters, twin baby girls. But she never looked back with any regret. We didn't quite pick the right kind of prodigy at first. My mother thought that I could be a Chinese Shirley Temple. We'd watch Shirley's old videos on TV as though they were training films. My mother would tap me and say, "Nikan, you watch." And I would see Shirley tapping her feet, or singing a sailor song, or pursing her lips in a very round O while saying, "Oh my goodness." "Nikan," my mother said, as Shirley's eyes flooded with tears. "You already know how. You don't need talent for crying." And soon after my mother got this idea about Shirley Temple, she saw an episode of The Ed Sullivan Show. That's when she planned out my schedule for piano lessons and piano practice. She had talked to Mr. Chong, who lived on the first floor of our apartment building. Mr. Chong was a retired old piano teacher. She had told me that from then on, I'm going to have to practice piano and play piano with him. She had exchanged house cleaning services for weekly lessons every single day, 2 hours a day, from 4 until 6. When my mother told me this, I thought I'd been sent to hell. I kicked my foot a little when I whined and I couldn't stand it anymore. "Why don't you like me the way that I am? I'm not a genius. I can't play the piano, and even if I could, I wouldn't do it if you paid me $1 million. My mother slapped me. "Who asked you to be a genius, Only asked for you to be your best. You think I want you to be a genius? What for?" The lessons went a little like this. He would point to certain things at the book and explain their purpose. I would play after him, a simple scale, a simple chord. And then I would just make up some stuff, and it sounded like a cat running up and down some garbage cans. He would then smile and applaud and say, "Very good, but now you must learn to keep time." A few weeks later, my mother and Old Chong conspired to have me play in a talent show that was to be held at the church hall. My parents saved up enough money to buy me a secondhand piano. It was a black Wurlitzer Spinet with a scarred bench. It was the showpiece of our living room. And the piece that I was to play was called Pleading Child by Schumann Scenes in Childhood. I was supposed to memorize the entire thing, but I dawdled over it. I'd play a few keys and then cheat and look over at the notes that followed. I'd never really listened to what I was playing. I'd always imagined about being somewhere else, about being someone else. But I did like one part, though. It was fancy curtsy. Right foot out, pointed foot on the carpet, sweep to the side, bend left leg, and then smile. The audience would sigh in unison, "Aw," and then clap enthusiastically. And when my turn had finally come, I was actually quite confident. It was as though I knew that the entire time the prodigy side of me really did exist. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my moment. And I looked over the crowd to see my mother's blank face, my father's yawn, and Ed Sullivan rushing up to introduce me to everyone on TV. And then I began to play. Everything was so beautiful. I was so caught up on how lovely I looked, I wasn't quite worried about how it would sound. So I was quite surprised when I hit the first note wrong. And then I hit another. And then another. A chill began to trickle down from the top of my head to my toes. But yeah, I couldn't stop playing. It was as though my hands were bewitched. I played this strange jumble all the way throughout the end. The sour notes staying with me all the way. And when I got up, I noticed my legs were shaking. Maybe I'd just been nervous. Maybe just like Old Chong, they saw me go through all the right motions and had not heard a single thing wrong. I did my curtsy, and I looked up, and I realized the crowd was silent. Except Old Chong, who was beaming and shouting, "Bravo, bravo, well done." But by then I saw my mother's face, her stricken face. And as the audience clapped weakly, I walked back to my chair with my whole face quivering as I cried. And I assumed that after that talent show fiasco, that I wouldn't have to play piano again. But 2 days later, my mother saw me watching TV after school and shouted, "4 o'clock," from the kitchen. I was stunned. I was gonna go through that talent show torture all over again? No. So I did not reply, and I squared myself even closer to the TV. 5 minutes later, "Turn off TV," she shouted once again. I ignored her again. But then I realized I didn't have to do and listen to her anymore. I already did before. I'm not her slave. This isn't China. And the one time I did listen to her, look what happened. She was a stupid one. She placed herself even closer to the TV in front of me this time. 4 o'clock, she said, a lot louder and a lot more stern this time. I'm not gonna play piano. I'm not playing anymore. I'm not a genius. I'm not good at it. There's no point. "Only 2 kinds of daughters," she said. "Those who obey and those who follow." I see her chest heaving up and down in a very angry way. Honestly, at that point, I saw her anger almost rising to its breaking point. At that moment, I wanted to see it spill over. And that's when I remembered the 2 daughters she had lost in China. The ones we never talk about. Then I wish I'd never been born. I wish I was dead, like them. It was as if I said the magic words. Alakazam. Her face went blank, her mouth closed, and her arms went slack. She backed out of the room like a small brown leaf, thin, brittle, lifeless. And sadly, It wasn't the only time that I've ever disappointed her. I failed her many times, each time asserting my will and my right to fall short of her expectations. I didn't get straight A's. I didn't become class president. I didn't get into Stanford. And I dropped out of college. Unlike my mother, I didn't believe that I could be anything that I wanted to be. I could only be me. And in the years that followed, we never talked about the disaster at the recital or the terrible declarations I made to her at the piano bench. It was as if the betrayal was so large, it was unspeakable. Later on, the piano bench, the lessons stopped, everything pretty much came to an end. The piano lid closed, shutting out the dust, my misery, and her dreams. And a few months later, my mother had died. I had the piano retuned. I opened up the lid and then played a few keys. It sounded a lot richer than I remembered. Honestly, it was a really good piano. And in the piano bench were the same secondhand books held together with yellow tape. I opened them up and I flipped through the pages, the piece that I once played before on the left-hand side, titled Pleading Child. It honestly looked a lot more difficult than it was, but once I played a few chords, I was pretty surprised by how easily it came back to me. And for the first time, or so it seemed, I noticed the piece on the right-hand side. It was titled Perfectly Contented. It had a lighter melody, but the same flowing rhythm as Pleading Child. I played both of the pieces a few times, and then I realized it was two halves of the same song all along.
Ellen Wynn reading Amy Tan. If you have no choice but to miss either this next student performance or me following, miss me. Jack Brubaker, come on up.
When people find out we're raising young transgender child, they always have the same question. They always say, well, how can you tell? How do you know your child is transitioning? And I always have the same response. Because they tell ya. And then people always seem to have the same follow-up question. What if they change their minds? And I always say, I'm pretty sure they'd tell you. You see, the tricky part is you have to be able to hear it. And all right, I'll admit, it took me way too long before I heard it. Like when Joey was 4 years old, we're walking through the park and he's skipping around, singing, picking wildflowers to make a bouquet for mommy. When right out of the blue, he goes, I wish I could crawl back up in mommy's tummy and come back out a girl. One thing I could think to say was, well, you know, if you were back up in mommy's tummy, you would come out of poop. But nah, I don't say that because I'm not supposed to encourage it, not make everything into a poop joke. But I'm also not prepared to have a conversation about biology and reproduction. I mean, the kid's too young for that stuff, right? Eli Harwood, a working professor at Pass Center in Denver, Colorado, said that among the 5 most important things we can teach our children, the most powerful one is, it is not your job to make me happy. It is your job to figure out who you are and be true to that. This idea is especially important when we are advocating for the transgender youth in our lives. Getting support, educating ourselves, and practice can significantly improve the journey of children who are transitioning in the LGBTQIA+ community. Ultimately, we should be willing to listen to and change for others because that is what we would want in our own time of need. This story talks about one parent's journey as they are faced with their own personal struggles as they help their child navigate who is transitioning. He's My Daughter Now by Justin Offworth. Now, we had the happiest, singingest, dancingest, dressing up this little kid you ever wanted to see. He used to always try to steal clothes from mommy, which is kind of a problem until one day, mommy gives him this puffy old, ratty old green skirt, and he put that skirt on and he started glowing. I have never seen a child more happy. He starts dancing around. Look at me, look at my skirt, look at me, daddy, look at me. He goes over to the mirror and he does all these like sassy poses, and I'm like, dang, Junior, you look sassy. And he said, I am sassy, daddy, but you don't know. I'm a half a lady. And I just thought it was cute, you know. I took a little video. We just had this huge collection of dress-up clothes, you know, dresses and skirts and long hair wigs and high heels and scarves and jewelry and mommy's old purses and anything the child could steal from mommy. And everything was perfect until preschool, until we got him home with the other kids. And then he really started to come home upset because the other kids didn't want him to wear skirts and didn't want him to have his nails painted. And he should play with the boys because he's a boy. By the time kindergarten rolled around, Joey really started to come home grumpy and unsingy and undancy. He starts punching me for no reason. And then he starts to say the kind of stuff that teenagers say to their parents, you know, I hate you, daddy. I mean, I didn't have the best parenting role models growing up. Like when I was growing up, my parents, they just gave up. And then they got divorced. And now I might just be the worst parent in the whole world, but I was not gonna just give up. I was gonna worry, and I was gonna wait until this works itself out. But Joey started acting out. I find this white, drippy crust on the mirror, like, what is that? Joey was spitting in the... Every time he'd walk past the mirror, he'd spit in it. He didn't know what was going on. We started talking about maybe going to therapy or something. And then he starts just pooping everywhere, you know, on the floor, in the bathtub, in his pants, just everywhere, everyday poop. And one day I find him. He's in the bathroom in his favorite dress-up pink dress and a big pile of poop, and it's on his hands and his hair, on his dress, and he's spitting in the mirror, and he's saying, I am so ugly. I am so stupid. I wish I was never born. And this child is 5 years old. I wish I was never born. Now, this would be a great place, storytelling-wise, for me to have my epiphany, right? You know, I was standing there looking at my child through this dripping veil of poop and tears. That would be beautiful. But that's not what happened. What happened was I saw my little guy standing there, and I got really mad, you know. What are you doing? Did you spit? Is that poop? What is wrong with you? Nut house! Go in the bathroom and clean yourself up. And that's what happened. I got mad, and the child shut down, and I stood there cleaning up the mess, moaning and groaning and complaining to myself the whole time. And it wasn't until the next day we're over at Grandma's house and we're having lunch and he poops himself at the table. And at this, I can't even look at Grandma. I just say, go clean yourself up. I finally start to tell her the story of the day before with the spit and the mirror and the poop. And Grandma just lets me talk. And finally, I look up, and her eyes are all red, and she's been crying. And she pushes her spaghetti back, sits up in her chair, and she says, Justin, do you think that maybe all this acting out, all this spitting, and all this poop, do you think maybe it has anything to do with the fact that Joey likes to wear girls' clothes all the time and that Joey wants to be a girl? So on the way home, I asked him. I said, Joey, look at me. I'm looking in the rearview mirror. Joey. What, Daddy? Joey, do you want to be a girl? He's looking out the window. I am a girl, Daddy. You won't let me. And it was in that moment, that I could finally hear my child. That was my real epiphany right there. Now, hearing your child does not solve everything. We had to start working on transitioning the environment around the child. We started reading all this stuff about gender identity, because that's what really happens, you see. The child stays exactly the same, and it's the environment around the child that starts to transition. And everything adjusted pretty well, actually. And in fact, just about a year ago today, she started in the first grade. She changed her name from Joey to Lisa. She started to wear the girls' uniform, and she got her spark back. And she loves to dance in front of the mirror. And in fact, she even told me, you're a pretty good daddy. And I'll take that. So, yeah, she's my daughter now, and she's beautiful.
Jack Brubaker. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Jack. Last up, me. I am the youngest child, 2 of 2, of the youngest child, 7 of 7, who is in turn the daughter of Romanian immigrants. My grandparents, the only grandparents I know are my maternal grandparents, came over from Romania in 1908. The story we always got growing up was that they were escaping the draft, that my grandfather was being drafted, and they were draft evaders, which is a strange story, but I always, kept it with me. And then about 8 or 9 years ago, my cousin, who's a history professor, and I and our spouses were the only ones who were interested in our ancestry, went to Romania to find the town that we had heard about where our grandparents grew up, called Focșani. And we went to Romania, and it was a pleasant trip, good traveling. Focșani was not a pretty place, but we learned in Focșani that there was a synagogue, one of 2, and the only way they could conduct services was if some of the Gentiles in town would come be part of the minyan, which is a kind of a quorum that you need in order to hold services. Because there were no Jews left in Romania, and certainly not in Focșani. At one point, Focșani had 108 synagogues. The Jews had been pushed out in a series of pogroms, forced exoduses, from many Eastern European countries and ultimately European countries over time, particularly in the early 20th century. And they left in 1908 because it was one of those pogroms where they were being forced out. And it was always so interesting to me that we had never heard that story. And it was really after the trip, a couple years later, that I started to put two and two together and realized it was the shame of victims. Like, even though they had had something terrible done to them, they were ashamed of it. How crazy is that, right? And then they had this cockamamie story about draft debaters, which didn't even correspond to a military effort at the time, so there was no draft. It was that they had been pushed out. So how odd. They came here with very little in their pockets and very little skill. My grandfather was a barber, and he made his living as a barber, and then he became disabled and sold barber supplies because he couldn't stand on his feet all day. They had a quick succession of 7 children, my mother being the youngest. They learned English from radio and ultimately from TV. I always remember a little bit of my grandmother growing up. They died fairly young because I am the youngest of the youngest. They were pretty old by the time I was born. And I remember that when she watched the news and she watched Walter Cronkite, she thought Walter was actually talking to her. She had just come from a world where the TV was so foreign and you come into this generation of technology and she didn't quite understand it. And I think she meant it too. So my mother, the youngest child, got a high school education, terrible fighting between the siblings, never really supported each other very much. She didn't get a lot of skills in high school, didn't do very well, but she graduated, and then she married a man who hit her twice. Her brothers and brother-in-laws all told her to stay in the marriage, that if she left the marriage, she would be a divorcee and would have a hard time creating a new family in the future, and she should just go through it. She didn't. My mother left. My mother doesn't go through crap. She left, she remarried, and she married my father, and they were together for 10 years. They had my brother who's 5 years older than me, and when I was 3, they divorced. They divorced for unpleasant reasons. My father was getting involved in organized crime in the Detroit Mafia, being pulled in by his brother, Max Stern, you can look him up, who, when they were divorcing, told my mother that my older brother would go with my father and she would get me. And when she said no, she would take both sons. Uncle Max came over. My brother and I were escorted to some sort of weird carnival by an aunt, and my Uncle Max beat up my mother until she would sign a divorce paper that said my brother was going to my father. My brother ran away several times, and each time my mother would take him in and go back to court and fight for him, and eventually she won custody of my brother as well in court. My mother got out of this marriage with very few skills, and about a year later my father started a new family and sought for reduction in his custody, in his child support payments. And because his income was all illegal, he was able to show that he had almost no income and couldn't afford child support. So my mother was left with no skills and no child support to raise 2 kids. So she took what she had from alimony from their divorce settlement from the sale of their home, and she bought the only house she could manage to afford, a very small house that I grew up in the neighborhood that she researched to have the best public schools so that my brother and I would have a good education and have a better life than hers. She first took a job as a secretary, and my mother, she looked a little, to look at me, you'll never believe this, but looked a little like Dusty Springfield. Check out an album cover of Dusty Springfield from my mother's era. So she was kind of a looker, and I think she got hired as a secretary because she was a looker and not because of her skills. And I remember one of my earliest memories from like age 4 was my mom coming home, having quit this job as a secretary, and telling me about it. My brother wasn't yet living with us. And she said, he chased me around the desk, so I quit. And I had no idea what that meant. I thought it was like Duck, Duck, Goose. I thought it was like a game. And she just, she let that go. And it wasn't until years later that she told me, about sexual assault and what being chased around the desk actually meant back in that era. So she did quit. My mother does not put up with crap. And she got a job as a candy salesperson. She carried candy in her car
wholesale to sell it to little shops that sold candy retail. So we always had candy in the house, even though, sort of like Heidi, I don't think I grew up with the best nutritional values. As a result, Kit Kats and Malibars. But then she used the skill set that she got as a salesperson to start selling mausoleum crypts. That was her next big sales job. So my mother, by this time my brother was with us, and my mother had to go, it was open house at the mausoleum on Sunday. So we would play in the section being built under construction. We'd like crawl through the vaults so that my mother could be with clients and sell vaults in the part that was already finished. And my brother and I joked about this years later, and it was only then we realized in a big laugh, like, oh my God, that wasn't a normal childhood, was it? To be crawling through mausoleum vaults. But from there, she parlayed those skills into real estate, and that ended up being the career for the rest of her life. But real estate had lots of ups and downs. I mean, in the 70s, you remember, and people are starting to read now about, interest rates hitting, 18, 19% mortgage rates. It was just crazy. The real estate market basically shut down. And there were some really lean years, and that's, when I would notice like long periods of time where we were living off really crappy food and we'd get to go to the Sears cafeteria. Wow, wasn't that fun? And again, years later, just put that together. The other thing that, it struck me from childhood and why I love these where I'm from stories is because as you get older, you start to put together not only, harmful things from your past, but good things that, make you who you are. But I remember specifically, here's this strange thing, and very few of you know this, but I'm very good at simple math in my head. Like when people give me a spreadsheet and like there's an error in the formula and no one's seeing it because look, the formula's right, that's what the spreadsheet's telling us, I do estimations in my head, and often I see these differences, or adding a large string of numbers in my head. I've always been able to do that. And I'm not that great at math, and I'm not that smart to begin with, so where did I get this skill? And it was really just a few years ago that I figured out when my mother used to go to the grocery store, she'd have a limited amount of cash, and it was super humiliating. And I remember several times where it happened where you had more groceries than cash, and you had to pick the things that were gonna go back. And I don't know what it is back then, but it doesn't seem like the cashiers were very kind about it. They were really, they would make a big scene about it. And as a kid standing next to your mom, it's sort of humiliating. So what I learned to do was add up the items as they were going across the belt really quickly, like estimations, like rounding up to the nearest 10 cents and then doing all the addition as it went, so I could tell my mother when she was gonna run over. And it worked. We didn't have a lot of those experiences after that. So I think, there's good things that come from unpleasant parts of our childhood. And I think where I'm from is more than just, the negative baggage that we bring in, but sometimes I like to say it's the luggage, because there's like things you need. Baggage implies it's all negative, right? But we all bring luggage to the table from where we're from. And there's good things in there and there's bad things. But the more we take the time to learn about each other and where we come from, and what we bring to the table, the better we understand each other. But also I find it really validating to know, even listening today to some of these stories, that we all think we had this crazy other, history, other in quote, being othered. And many of us did. It's super common. And it's good to commiserate and to feel that. And you start to realize that other is the norm. Like, that's really what most people hated high school. Most people had terrible experiences, right? We're normal. Those of you who loved high school, you're the freaks. So that's where I'm from, and I want to thank everyone who contributed their where I'm from today as well. I'd like to end today on what I hope that wasn't a negative note, but on a more up note in terms of some crazy, wonderful things we have going on campus, just to keep you all briefed as we normally do when we start off a semester with some of these updates. So first, welcome and welcome back, faculty. If you haven't been to campus in a while and you noticed the progress on Gateway, you'll notice that we are finishing up basically shelling it in, creating a weatherproof building. Windows will go in soon. The glass is already going up on the quad face. It's 2-story high glass that faces the quad. You can really get a vision for what this amazing building is going to look at when one part on the first floor faces the parking lot for new incoming students, and the second floor part with all glass transparency, access, faces the quad for our existing students. It's very exciting to see that going up. Landscape project has begun, landscape beautification, we're calling it generically. You may see a lot of dirt. If you come in from one of the entrances, you're seeing dirt everywhere. They're dozing and grading, and they pulled up a lot of grass, and new landscaping is going to go in at each of the entrances on both sides and around the sign, around parking lot 13 in front of Health Sciences, and around Fine Arts Complex. It's really a very large landscaping project, and it's going really well and really fast, and you're going to see a lot of beautification happening by spring as a result. If you work in BGS or teach in BGS, you may know that the interiors are painted. I went in hoping to get a whiff of paint smell, because I do like fresh paint smell, but to my surprise, they were airing it out all over break, and there's not much smell left. If you don't like the smell, I'm sorry, there might be a little bit left. If you do like the smell, sorry, it's almost all gone. But BGS looks a lot better. The colors look a lot nicer. We're trying to give our students and those of you who work in that building a great working environment that you feel proud of, and you deserve that. The outside of BGS will be painted this spring, and the insides of both Health Sciences and the Science Building, the hallways, will be painted this spring as well. So lots of beautification happening inside and out. And yes, by the way, the old crazy digital sign thing on the side of BGS, whatever that is, and that little show window thing with like old papers inside, that's coming down. So that'll be gone. And our Public Art Committee will be working on identifying a potential art commission for painting a mural on that side of the building as well, facing the quad. So we're very excited about that work that's happening. The Wonder sign is going to be replaced. That same committee is going to be identifying potential, well, we'll basically put out an RFP for it. It'll be a process where we will identify, it's sort of a combination of art and construction to create that sign. But you'll be glad to know if you're afraid of missing the Wonder sign, because it is iconic for our campus. We're going to replace it. We're going to do something at scale or bigger, because we think it's a really iconic, Instagrammable part of our campus, and we want to make it even more so. So we've even talked about like putting a seat inside of the O so that people can sit and pose for Instagram photos. So we're not going to get rid of it. We're going to just make it better. Saddleback at ATEP will be breaking ground. Our new building was approved by the trustees at their last meeting, and we will be breaking ground at our new campus in Tustin within days. Math and Computer Science building, one of everybody's favorites, that's going to be coming down. We're going to have a demolition party in the next few months, and we're looking forward to that. Dana's clapping at that. I'm clapping at that too. We are going to try to save, by the way. I know people, we hate to lose something that means something to us. There's those weird hieroglyphic-like symbols at the top. We are going to try to save some of those and incorporate them into the garden, so that we will have a way of remembering the building that used to be in that place. But the new building will go up. It's a smaller footprint, but an amazing, beautiful building. It looks like a modern art museum. It's just really, really cool. You're going to love it. Housing construction grant application goes before the board, and we hope, if the board approves it, that we will be submitting our grant for fully state-funded housing on the site of our current village. Looking forward to that as well. It is, of course, Flex Week. It's PD Week. Thursday is Neurodiversity Day. I want to thank Heidi for putting together an amazing project, and the many people who have worked with her on that. I look forward to attending at least the keynote on that. I know that's a well-known individual, and I'm really excited about that. We have 2 great book reads coming up this semester. I did not finish either of them over break, so I'm going to be reading along with you. I want to thank Margot and the whole team that is putting together the facilitated discussions for the End of Bias, which is the President's Read. The kickoff for that is tomorrow morning, I believe, 9 a.m. Look for the link. I think it went out from Leah. Look for an email from Leah if you missed that one. And then the Nature Fix, which is our one book on one campus coming up. Nature Fix, about the importance of nature in our lives and in, forgive use of the word, the spiritual sense. Giving us something that we feel we're part of and recognizing our place on Earth. And we're looking forward to reading the Nature Fix as well. We have mandatory bias training to coincide very well with the End of Bias coming up. We already have managers and classified professionals signed on. We're close, if not already there, with FA. So we hope ultimately that mandatory bias training will be mandatory for everybody on our campus, including me. We think that's a really important hour that we all need to spend going through our biases and identifying ways to deal with them and correct them. We are working with Academic Senate to create what we hope will be by next year a full-time professional development coordinator, a faculty who will have a full-time reassignment to work on professional development. My first college had a full-time faculty coordinator for BD. I think it's a really good model, and we're working on making that happen here as well. As Michelle said, our classified professionals and our amazing new classified professional Senate leaders have put together a launch for Caring Campus. That you're going to hear more about that. Many of you will be invited to participate in the steering committee. We're looking forward to launching Caring Campus. Caring Campus has changed a little bit since IBC adopted it, and even since we went through it the first time. They've now used their own Caring Campus campuses to identify the practices that actually work the best. And instead of having each campus come up with their own, we're going to be taught the 5 practices that work the best in terms of creating that sense of inclusiveness and hopefully making changes in equity gaps for students on our campus. We are going to be introducing data coaches. So voluntary training will be created to create data coaches for each of the schools, so people who can facilitate analyzing, understanding data, and using it in our practices and our meetings. We're going to be starting with the department chairs. They'll be the first ones eligible for that training, and then we'll go for there. Applications will go out in February. In just a few weeks, we will be introducing the course completion report. This is a request that I made of Senate leaders and of Oprah that like many universities, include the CSUs, we give our faculty that information after the term is over about what their course completion rate was for their own courses, how that compares to other people who teach that class, and then broken down by demographic group so that you can see, so that you and you alone can see, by the way, how that breaks down in terms of minoritized students, students who might be first generation, etc. And then we hope what will follow will be more information about how to work with that, how to identify those gaps in your own classroom, what PD is available to help you with that. And then I hope that will spawn more conversations within departments and within the schools themselves to identify where those gaps are and where we can work together and where all of us can support you in it. None of the information on course completion is being used evaluatively, and only the instructor and their dean presumably is going to receive that information. And if the departments want to work with that information to talk about inter-rater reliability and different gaps within their department, they're free to work with Oprah to do that. Oprah can create course completion sheets with you without names so that you have that information in front of you. So we want to make sure that course completion data is used productively and not as a shaming exercise. So we're doing everything in our power to make sure that that works. We're about to launch our new IFP. It's the Innovation Fund Project. So in addition to the normal CRC, our Course Resource Committee requests, we now have a second request process that is built with and aligned with the CRC for small requests for things that are innovative. You know, if you're going to spawn innovation at an institution as large as ours, you kind of need to help it and facilitate it and incubate it. And one of the ways you start doing that is with funding sources that are not as complex as the CRC. So an informal process for small pots of money, but the projects that will be funded will still be scalable. So we're working with pilots, but pilots that can then be grown into larger projects. And we want to see what the metrics are that we're going to be using to find out how effective they're going to be so we know what's working and what's not working. We are currently recruiting for the start of men's soccer this fall. So after producing an award-winning national and state championship women's soccer team, we thought, hey, what the heck, maybe we should do this for the guys too. So we have a lot of men's soccer going around us in our feeder schools, and we think this is a great opportunity to start a men's soccer program. Many people, thank you, everyone involved in accreditation and our work on the ICER, who've been working to complete our first draft of that. That is in its near completion phase as a first draft, and then we'll be circulating it in February to various stakeholders for review. Some really exciting news in ZTC and online education. You know, in ZTC, we have long been a statewide leader, but we are about to reach a very important threshold. We are right now within inches of hitting 50% of all of our enrollments as ZTC. 50% of our enrollments. It's really quite an incredible accomplishment. So thank you to all who have made that happen, to Kim, to of course Marina before her, to the work that you do with librarians and with our facilitators who help our faculty adopt ZTC sources, and to all of you faculty who have done so. We are very grateful. Your students are very grateful. By the way, the percentage of overall sections that are ZTC is smaller than that 50%, but that's because they're more popular. So more students take ZTC sections, and therefore we see 50% enrollment even though we're not there in sections. So very exciting that we will be able to market ourselves very shortly, probably by fall, as a majority ZTC school. That's really quite incredible. Thank you all who make that happen. In online education, I think it's been an interesting story for us. We were always an online leader for a long time. We have stood out as #1 or #2 in the state in online education, depending on whether you count enrollments or sections available. And for us, that's been a point of pride. And then when the pandemic came through, it just took all the playing pieces off the board, and suddenly we were all equal because we were all 100% online. And the schools who'd never done it before had to scramble to do it. And we, who were already doing it at 30%, were kind of a little bit better at it because we had a good head start and people who knew how to train other people. And we did that, and we took advantage of it. And now we're bringing students back, and we no longer will measure the effectiveness of our online education program by the percentage of students who are online, because in some ways it may be a failure of some colleges not to bring more of their students back when many of them need to come back. So the new thing I want us to get started to thinking about, and all of our online education facilitators have been thinking about this for years, is the number of credentials that we actually have at our college that are completely online, meaning every course a student needs to take is online and available and on the schedule, meaning a student can be completely online and never set foot on this campus. We might not want that, but the students kind of want it. There's a whole bunch of students who really fell in love with online learning, and there's a whole bunch of non-traditional students and upskillers who want to come back, but they don't want to come back to campus. They have busy lives. They need to be able to make this work around their schedules. So we are building all online credentials and have been doing so for a while, and very quietly, these heroes of programs who are making each class one by one online keep adding to that tally. We are now at 85 credentials completely online at our campus. And we are this close to doubling that to 170, because there's another 85 that may be just a course or two away, or maybe the class isn't on the schedule regularly, or maybe it's hybrid and we just need to push it over the line to completely online. So we are very close to reassuming our place on the throne as statewide leader in online education once again. This is Saddleback, and thank you for all of the people who make that happen in our online areas. We have lots of stuff happening in terms of our alignment with Guided Pathways. As you know, we announced a restructuring from the divisions into a school structure, and now we're working on implementing that to be effective for July 1. We're now identifying potential spaces that could serve as communal spaces for students in each of those schools, so that services could be coordinated to bring some of those services to students on a specific day, or tutoring could be available to students in that space that's just there for amped students, for instance. So working on creating those communal spaces to give those students a somewhat smaller school feel, and not just the giant college, not a college of 25,000, not a college of a welcome sign with a hallway with 50 doors down student services and you got to figure out where to go and what to get help, but instead a school of around 1,500 to 3,000 students where we bring some of those services to them and they can hang out with people with similar career goals. So those spaces are in the works. Counselors and deans for each of the school, the counselors have been working to try to find alignment between what they do and some of the schools. So we hope to see very soon that some of the counselors will actually be identifying their own areas of emphasis in their own counseling, and maybe we can get the counselors to actually come to those spaces on certain days and counsel students right in the communal spaces. And everything in what we do can be better aligned with this smaller structure, or at least a structure that feels smaller to the students. Onboarding is up next. We have to have a big conversation on our campus on what onboarding looks like. And onboarding is big. Onboarding isn't just orientation. Onboarding isn't just college success. Onboarding is everything about how we help our students be students and be better students and stay on their path all the way through completion. And we want that conversation to be between student services and instruction and counselors and instructors and managers and classified professionals who are the first line with our students. We need to have a big conversation about what onboarding looks like and then work from the ground up to create a process that is data informed, because lots of onboarding doesn't really work in the national data, that is data informed to actually help our students and align with guided pathways. Our Mesa Center will open up in Art's new school very shortly by fall. We will be looking for a Mesa lead to head up that program that will report to Art. And that person will also be served and will be working very closely with our new Director of Equity position. We're hiring 2 more success coaches this spring so that we will have enough success coaches to have at least 1 or 2 in each of the schools. And best of all, my last update for today is the most important. You may have noticed, if you went to our website, that things look different. The screen looked strangely clean and colorful and dynamic and energetic and modern. And it was a big shift, even more so if you look at the district site. You will wonder where you are. So we are very proud of the work that our vendor did, but I want to thank Jenny, her team, and all of the people who worked on the steering committee for our new website. You have done an amazing job, and we are very proud. The website is our front door. It is the portal to our school. In a recent national study, the website was shown to be by far the most common resource for prospective students looking at schools. By far, 2 to 1, next to the next best thing, whether it was campus visits or calling somebody or their advice from a high school counselor. Website. This is our front door. And I mentioned my mother was in real estate. One of the things my mother taught me being a realtor, well, a couple things. One is really bad, one is really good. Here's the bad. Never paint your walls funky colors, because you have to be ready to sell at any moment, and no buyer wants your funky colors. Keep your walls white and off-white and beige. And I don't do a lot of white walls, so sorry, Mom. Not good advice. We're staying in our house, and we can always paint them white later. Thank you. But her good advice was the front door is the front door to your house, and it's the thing the buyers see first. Well, it's also the thing the guests see first. It's also the thing you see first when you get home. And always keep it painted brightly in a good, warm, sunshiny color. And we now have a website that is our front door that is painted a bright color and is the website into our school in 2023. And we are really grateful and excited about that. And finally, I just want to say about all of this work in general, the beautification that is happening on our campus proper physically, the work that is happening programmatically in student supports, in basic needs and guided pathways to make our students more successful, to increase access to minoritized students, to lower and narrow, if not eliminate, those equity gaps. All of that work is happening with that goal in mind. And all of that work is going to be successful if we continue on the road of always seeing a better tomorrow, another thing that we can do that is better for our students. Change is hard, but change has to happen in order to achieve the goals that we all want. As Chancellor Barnes said, we all share the same desire to have more students successful. We all share the same desire to have greater access. We all share the same desire to eliminate the equity gaps. What we need to share is a common journey and a common vision of where we're going and how we're going to get there and do it together, and realizing that when you go to a new website, it may affect for a few minutes how you used to navigate or where you store your files, but we need to do it that way for prospective students so that the search actually works when they search something. And when I search for calendar, it doesn't pull up someone's class calendar from 1982. All of that is necessary. Change is necessary to do these good things for students. So we are changing. We have changed. And 2023 is going to be a year of great change for us. And that is not a negative. That is a great positive. And I am so proud to be here, and I know many of you are so proud to be here at this time of change, to be at Saddleback in 2023. Changed forever. Thank you and welcome. Have a great spring term.